Hello, guys. This is Tlawi from The Human and Machine, and here is my co host.
Hikaru.
So, we decided to have a different kind of series in The Human and the Machine because the crypto world, the blockchain world, the DeFi world are very new and they're actually very complex. So, there's nothing to be ashamed if you don't understand. There's a lot of things that I think even Hikaru himself, that is kind of an expert, he really is an expert on this. Like, he really needs to dig down and let some concepts sink because they are really abstract and things are getting very complicated, complex at least, right?
Completely agreed. And honestly, we believe that blockchain will become just as foundational as the internet did. But we're kind of like in the very early stages of blockchain. And we really just believe in the overall education and awareness of what it is in the most simplest terms possible.
Yeah. So this is the reason that we are starting this series. We're going to talk about like from the very beginning in the most basic possible way. And one thing we want is we want to hear from you. We want to hear from our audience. Whatever you want us to talk about, we're more than happy to include it in our series. So once we have established what we're doing here, and the name of the series is Will the Human Understand? So the challenge for Hikaru is to make everything so easy so easy to understand, so consumable, so far away from technicalities as it can possibly be, right? So the human, the average person understands, because that's absolutely true what you just said, right? Like this is going to permeate everything in our lives,
Exactly.
everything,
Yeah.
right? So
Next few decades, it's going to be blockchain everywhere. You may not even notice it, but it's going to be there.
it's
Yeah.
getting there actually, it's happening, right?
We
Like a
are.
lot of things are just happening, and the faster people understand this, the more they are going to be able to profit from it, to understand what they're doing, right?
Exactly. And not just profit, but like your future careers, your jobs.
Yep.
Sky's the limit in this case.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's being defined every single day. And we know it. We talk about projects all the time. We talk with the entrepreneurs. We talk with the thinkers every single day. And they themselves say it's like it's just happening. It's developing. We actually don't know where we're heading because we're going so fast and so many elements are being added every single day and combined and rethought, right? Repackaged. And every time it's more innovative and every time it's touching more the lives of the average person.
Exactly. And the really exciting part is this thing is just moving so fast that it's even difficult for people in the industry to keep up. So, I think today, right, the whole point is to really start simple from the grassroots level and really understand the basics of it because that's, again, the foundation to everything that's happening today in the whole blockchain space.
True, true.
Yeah.
And let's start with the basic. When we talk blockchain, everyone immediately associates it with Bitcoin.
Right.
But let's take a few step backs to actually understand what blockchain is, because without that, everyone will just say it's digital money. What is digital money, right? Like,
Right.
so let's start blockchain. Blockchain resolved thousands, like at least recorded 7 or 8 thousand
Yeah.
years old problem. It was about ledgers, right?
Right.
Can you explain a little bit what a ledger is?
Right. I mean, there's of course multiple definitions, but I think in the most simplest form, a ledger is just an account of records, right? What could those records be? It can be just statements of what you spent, how much money you used, which date, the amount, and so on. So it's literally just a list, right? And that's what a ledger is in its most simplest form. So, are
Right.
you still with me?
Yeah, sure. I actually do understand this very
Yeah, we
well.
just started.
But
Yeah.
that's a ledger. In this case, like we needed at some point, people started like doing business, right? Like I started borrowing or I started promising, like I was going to pay a certain amount of money for certain product, agricultural product most likely was the first time, and actually we know that was the agricultural thing, right? So we needed someone that certified, right, that validated what was put in the book, right? Because
Exactly.
it could be altered by either party, right? At least for the one holding it.
Exactly, and you just really said a key point, altered. And let's just take a relatable example that we all know. For example, bank records, right? Everyone pretty much has a bank account, let's say. You're essentially trusting your bank entity to do the ledger keeping for you. right?
Yeah, true.
Whenever you deposit into your bank account, whenever you withdraw, and whenever you pay someone, right, through your bank account, all of those transactions are being recorded and verified by who? Your bank.
Yeah.
And that means inherently you have to trust your bank. Now,
Yeah, sure.
trust is a double-edged sword. So I do want to ask you, why do you think it's a double-edged sword?
Well, why? it's l- well, I really have to trust you, right? But that trust is inherently easy to break, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like who the bank is. Why do I trust the bank more than anyone else? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Trust is good, right? If you know that person, they're a big institution. It removes a lot of the hassle on your side. You just transact, use your bank app, and carry on with your other lives. So it's very convenient. But at the same time, like you said, trust can be easily broken.
Yeah.
And we've seen in history time and time again of banks failing, banks getting hacked. And just beyond banks, right? We've seen many types of companies getting hacked, whether it's like a digital company, gaming company. Anyone that literally holds your private information is at risk, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so interesting because when I explained first, for example, to my girlfriend, right, about like investing in Bitcoin and this and that, she was like, "How can I trust it?" It's like,
Right.
well, how can you trust your bank? Everyone has this idea that banks never fail, that banks never ever ever go down. It's like they are like solid institutions, like the sky, or like the morning is like the night is going to turn into morning. But it's actually not true. It's just the way that we have. It's just cultural, right? I cannot say necessarily indoctrination, but since you wake up in life and you know what a
Right.
bank is, you are told that they're super trustworthy.
Exactly. And it's almost like the fish and water situation, right? You grew up your entire life thinking that banks are the absolute normal and money equals bank. And that is not wrong per se, right? Because that's how we're all living. But the fascinating thing about blockchain is it's literally changing that dynamic. That water is no longer just a bank. It can be something else.
Yeah, and this is where we get to a collective ledger. So in the case you were telling me, the bank itself is the ledger, right?
Correct.
And we trust the bank because somehow it's like the government, they got permission by the government to do this, right?
Exactly. Or even if it's not a bank, right? There's private, payment companies out there.
Yeah,
They grew to the size that they are now. They have reputation and so on.
they have
So
licenses and so
regardless,
on.
right? It's still a central entity, which is a common term that you'll keep hearing again and again in the
Yes.
blockchain industry.
Yeah, actually, that's why it has like the rebel kind of idea, right? Because you don't want centralized. You don't want a big daddy, like responsible for for everything that it's validated there.
Exactly. So that's a big question, right? If the bank gets hacked, then what?
Yeah.
Who's responsible? What are you supposed to do, right? You're essentially powerless at that point.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So then what happens with this blockchain idea, with the idea of a ledger that is not centralized?
Right. So, in the sense of, let's say, banks, for example, right? Money, it essentially democratizes financial freedom. Now, those are three big words, and people are like, oh, what does that mean, right? Why does it matter? Essentially, it gives complete control of how you own and who you own in terms of your money back to you and only you, right? So, the money that you own is under your full control and no one else, right? So, you don't need to trust anyone except for yourself. But you already trust yourself, right? The assumption
Sure.
is.
Yeah, of course. And how does the blockchain do? I mean, how does the blockchain become a ledger that is not centralized, is collective, right?
Exactly, and this is made possible because of the rise in availability of mobile phones, computers, and the internet. So essentially, what a blockchain does is it removes the central intermediary, right? Anyone that is verifying and transacting the ledgers, essentially, right? But the problem is you still need someone or something to keep
validate.
track, right? Otherwise, our lives would be a mess. Okay.
Sure.
So, blockchain essentially is kind of like a mesh or network that replaces a central intermediary, and you're able to transact and really keep track of all of these records without being feared of it getting like hacked. The records being changed. So it's a very secure, tamper-proof, and also transparent way to track all of these, such that it's fair for everyone, and it's encoded in literally the program itself. So there's no human involved per se.
Yeah, so instead of having this bank or whatever is central validator, you actually turn the data itself, the way we store the data becomes the validation on itself because it's immutable, it's not changeable, right? So we record things happening, correct? And this, because it's immutable, because it's unchangeable, right? It becomes the validation on itself. And because I don't have personally, or no one has, right? Like my creditor doesn't have the ledger, the book saying that I owe you such and such, then it's just collective. It's everywhere. I cannot go back, or you cannot go back, change it to something that suits you.
Nope.
So this is the validation, right? It becomes collective. It's just the data itself being immutable, not changeable, right? Becomes the validation on its own. Am I right?
You're right. Yeah. Basically, with blockchain, of course, there's different variations and types, different flavors, right? But the key idea is that it's designed in such a way, and this is really the beautiful part, is the people who need to validate the network, a group of computers, right? Or let's say nodes. They're essentially incentivized to really work together to do good for the network and disincentivized to like do something bad, as in, let's say, change the records or this and that. So the validators get rewarded for economic incentives, and then the people who transact and use the network, right, simply, are able to just transact and not worry about their data being, what do you call it? It's tamper-proof, right?
Tamper-proof.
Yeah, tamper-proof.
Okay, but I think I would like to go a little bit back. You talked already about the validators, and it's super important because they are the ones saying over and over, the information hasn't changed. The information hasn't changed.
Yes.
The information hasn't changed, like over and over and over. And that has a lot to do with the way the blockchain actually stores information, which is in blocks, right?
Right.
That's the name. So it's blocks of information chained, right?
Exactly.
As information comes, it's added in chunks or blocks, right? And once that block is full of information, a new block appears. So the validators are the ones validating the last chunks. Am I right?
You're essentially right, yeah. Hence the name now, blockchain, right? Basically, it all starts with what they call like a genesis block, the first block. And in that block, you have information packed in there. For example, T transacted this amount on this day at this time. I transacted this amount on this time, and so on. So you're going to have like hundreds or thousands of these, depending on the blockchain, all packed into a block. Now, once that block is, I would say, confirmed and fully validated, another block comes in, right, with the next so-and-so transactions. So imagine that keeps repeating. Now, every time it keeps repeating, these validators essentially check, well, they don't check the entire history, right, depending on the blockchain, but there's a way for them to make sure that they can go back and check that all of the records that were previously recorded are still set and straight. So you can imagine you have millions of these blocks, right, all forming. The longer and longer it gets, the harder it is to go back and try and change something.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not enough computer power to do that.
Exactly. So, yeah, computer power, however, it's secure. But that's basically the beauty of the design is the more users, the more transactions you're going to have. The longer this blockchain list grows, and the stronger the network gets in terms of being resilient to hacks or people attempting to like maliciously change any transaction. So it's a really, I would say, revolutionary design that, in my opinion, would deserve a Nobel Prize, right? If we had someone to give it to.
It's just an idea. That's the beauty of it. It's just an elegant idea of resolving thousands and thousands years problem. We talked before the opening this about the Mesopotamians, right? How they used to do like the transactions, and they were like on clay tablets, right? And then
Yeah.
it's from there, right? Like even at that stage in the story of humans, right?
Exactly.
We already were encountering this problem of people writing one thing and then changing it for someone's benefit, right?
Exactly. So, of course, before the digital era, right? Like you said, people were writing on tablets or even hieroglyphics or even like paper.
Yeah.
That was great for them at their time. But again, you run into the problem of what if I lose a paper? What if someone, scribbles something down and then changes it later?
Mm.
So, after, basically recently, once we came up with computers, people started just doing the same thing, essentially, just on a digital format.
Mm. Mm.
And once we have computers, right, now it's really easy to just copy and paste things.
Yeah.
Really easy. You just click, a button. So that caused the double spending problem, right? Especially when it comes to money. Because if you start transacting with money digitally, you can easily copy paste that as well.
Of course.
Yeah. So the only way in history really to solve this, or at least the one that we figured out to this day before blockchain, was you just have to trust an intermediary like a bank. Your online banking or whoever, right, controls your money, would say, hey guys, we're going to be the one in authority to make sure that there's no double spending problem. And that was really it. Yeah. And I guess it worked out well for decades, but we're at the point where
It was a different world.
it was a different
the
world.
technology
Yeah.
itself was not there available for everyone to go and mess up with a lot of information in the past, right?
Yeah.
But now the computing power of what a teenager can have is like it's enough to do a lot to mess institutions and central validators or anything. This can't.
Exactly. And now we're at the point where, most of us owns like a smartphone and computer. The internet is widely out there.
Yeah.
And we're really at the point where, okay, we can revolutionize or change the foundation of how we, transact value, right? Or information with each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I hope we kind of explained blockchain as good as we could. Of course, this is just one attempt. There's so many ways actually to talk about it, right? Like there's so many characteristics of the blockchain that we could go on and on. But we want to keep this series as short as possible, right? These episodes short, so they're like easily consumable for you guys. And so we're going to leave it here. Is that okay?
Yep. See
Yeah.
you next time.
I think next time, shall we talk about Satoshi and Bitcoin?
Of course.
Right?
The
Okay.
mysterious.
That's the legend. Well, thank you very much, bro.
All right.
So
Thank you.
see you next time.